Hello, Manhattan Apartments.
I have called every realtor in the entire city.
But everything else that I saw was horrible.
It doesn't even have a sink.
Finding a place to live is always tense, but in many places, politicians have done something that makes it tougher. Normally, when you rent an apartment or house, it costs what it costs because of simple supply and demand. When demand is high, investors see a chance to make a profit. They build more housing. Then supply increases, runs ahead of demand, and prices come back down. The result is affordable housing. That's how it usually works. But in some 200 American cities, politicians, to protect poor people, passed laws that control rents, limit increases. But it so often happens, laws that try to protect us from cruelties of the market have unintended side effects. Look at what's happened here in the city where I live. This is some of New York's most valuable real estate. Does this look like an area that needs to be protected from market cruelties? If you could find a Fifth Avenue apartment on a floor this high with this spectacular view, the rent would be more than $10,000 a month. Alistair Cook has this view. Remember him from Masterpiece Theater?
Good evening. I'm Alistair Cook.
Cook lives at a large apartment on the top floor of this building. But he doesn't pay the $10,000 a month you'd have to pay. He pays less than a fifth that. Wouldn't you like to pay less than a fifth of your rent or your mortgage? Cook pays less because he scored. He was lucky enough to live in this fashionable building at a time when politicians, to help poor people, regulated the rents.
I think he's a thief.
Economist Walter Williams.
A thief? Yes, he's using government to take what belongs to one person and give it to him. That is, if there were no rent control, he would have to pay the market price. But he's not paying the market price.
But he's not breaking any laws.
But laws don't establish morality.
Now, Cook didn't ask for any special breaks. The system just gives it. Remember the Mayflower Madam? Sidney Biddle Barrows made lots of money running a brothel. She pays about half what you'd have to pay for her apartment. Lots of politicians, rich businessmen, and celebrities benefit from rent controls meant for the poor. We usually only find out about them after they've been exposed. Supermodel Kim Alexis lived under rent protection. So did singer Carly Simon and fashion designer Arnold Scazzi. When he put his apartment in Architectural Digest, he didn't mention he was getting a rent break meant for the needy. We've been trying for weeks to get inside a wealthy person's rent-controlled apartment with our cameras, but it's virtually impossible. People just laughed and said, no way. But we can show you Mia Farrow's old rent-controlled apartment because Woody Allen shot the movie Hannah and Her Sisters here, a third of what you and I would have to pay on the open market. It's bad enough that controls let rich insiders get special deals, but the bigger unintended consequence of the laws is that houses and apartments left on the free market cost more. Newcomers pay inflated rents because cities with rent control tend to have less housing. Where there's rent control, landlords don't want to build. In unregulated cities like Dallas and Chicago, lots of apartments are available. But in rent-controlled cities like New York, you may have to bribe someone to get an apartment.
You can pay brokers under the table sometimes, which helps.
But we would never do that.
I would never do that.
Finally, the most destructive unintended consequence of rent controls is that some landlords say, if I can't raise the rent, I won't make repairs. And they don't.
Short of aerial bombardment, the best way to destroy a city is through rent controls.
Rent control is a big reason many landlords abandon their buildings, just walk away from their investment. You see acres of it here in New York. All this has led some opinion makers to have doubts and led some politicians to question the wisdom of what they had done. 2 years ago, Massachusetts decided to end rent control.
People are building housing now in Boston for the first time in 20 years.
Author William Tucker, who wrote this book about housing policy, says it turned out that only 6% of the people getting rent protection in Massachusetts were poor. Those people are now getting subsidies.
It would be a very easy thing to subsidize all the people in any city that need a little help in paying their rent. But instead you impose this blanket system that ruins the housing market, benefits all kinds of people who don't need it, and then you say, oh, we've got a housing crisis.
And that's what we have in New York City and other places where rents are still protected. While the privileged, the insiders, those who know how to work the system, get to freeload. And that's how it usually works.